All right, so we are live, and I'm here with Stephanie Williams. So welcome everyone to Free Comic Book Day. I'm Kat Purcell. I'm actually the career librarian here at the library, but I am a big fan of comics. So I was thrilled when Stephanie Williams agreed to do a live interview with us. She has written Nubia and Wakanda comics. She's written for all kinds of other geeky websites, fangirls, and done some amazing things. So with that brief introduction, do you want to expand on that a little bit more, Stephanie?
Yeah, sure. A lot of folks don't know this, but comics was, or just writing in general, wasn't my first profession. I originally was a research scientist, so well, a heck of a pivot. But one I've enjoyed. It was actually after having my son. It was like, ooh, I think I like science, but like it's not fully what I want to do for the rest of my life. So it started podcasting, talk about stuff that I like, and that was mainly comics because I'm never not reading them. And that just kind of morphed into another podcast, Missy Nice Uninformed Afro. It's a very academic approach to talking about Black superheroines in comics and like stories that were impactful for them and just I don't know, just being really nerdy about it. And then yeah, and then that morphed into writing about comics and other stuff too. And then I was like memeing into on Twitter. So like memes kind of led me to comics, which is funny, or writing them. And then yeah, like I'm here. And I know that is like a really that's a worse introduction, but
No.
it's a bit of a it's been a bit of a winding road, but I am here and happy to talk about everything comics
That's
related, not comics
awesome.
related. Yeah.
Yeah, so then that actually sparks a new question for me that I hadn't had planned. How much does your science background feed into the comics you write?
So in a I guess in an indirect way. So the research part has just probably been the X factor for me. And by that, like it for like Nubia, for instance, it was Nubia in the Amazons. I'm like, well, unfortunately, as far as the comics are concerned, like we've gotten some focus on the Amazons, but not a ton for me to get, I don't know, like a good feel for what life is like on this island. So I ended up reading not Madeline Cersei, Madeline Miller's
Yes.
Cersei. And absolutely loved it. But that was part of my research. It wasn't just reading older Wonder Woman comics. So science really helped me in being open to sourcing different material and trying to bring all that together and seeing what I could come up with out of that. It wasn't until recently with a new character that I just created for Marvel, Logan Lewis on the new Nightshade, that my science background like actually really came into play. And I was like, okay, well, if we're gonna create a superhero, and I know sometimes we get really nerdy and geeky about like how power sets work and everything. And then I found myself like really getting into it. So much so where I was like, maybe back up a little bit because it is still fiction. Like to be like the exact this is how the body works. And if you come into contact with this thing that doesn't exist, this is how it could affect you. So it was fun thinking of it in that way. But I have to say that my science background has helped me in ways that I just did not think it would in writing. Because like I wrote, but it was, boring science. Well, it wasn't boring science stuff, but
It was more
it was like
analytical. Yeah.
yeah, it was way more analytical and couldn't have all that much fun because, no one wants to hear about how many times you had to run a Western blot or a Southern blot to get your results.
No, I think that's great though. And I love that you incorporate that. I think that's one of the things that we see a lot at the library here is people will read either a comic or a book, a fiction book, and then it'll touch on something science related or art or history. And then that'll open up a
Yeah.
whole can of worms. And they're like, actually, now I need to know about the Great Wall of China or something like that. So
Yes.
I think that's so great. People have the option to dive in deeper if they want to. So that's cool.
It's a really great time. I'm even thinking recently, um, where was I? I think I was at a convention in Halifax, and they were like, "Hey, you want to do like, do you want to talk about something? And I get like, I guess. So outright times that comics have been political, but comics are like always political. Doesn't matter what you
Yes.
pick up. Even if it's My Little Pony, there's some politics in that. But it's fine. And one of the things that I talked about was the Avengers in affirmative action, because in there was like a 8-issue run, and this was like in the late 70s, early 80s, and Sam Wilson ends up joining the Avengers for the first time because of affirmative action, which I thought was really
Mm.
interesting. So I talked about that. Someone came to my table and he was like, well, yeah, like, I know, we're talking about affirmative action again now, and it's, it all kind of sounds like it's more of the same. And I'm like, well, yeah, because the more things change, the more some of them stay the same. So that was just really cool that comics is something, I don't know, like you read a random thing and like you said, like you want to go and search more stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Has that something on that particular topic with affirmative action, that have you run into that yourself in some of your comics or maybe your science? Is that something that you've dealt with personally?
Um, I believe so. Especially with my first my first job at I don't want to call any labs out, but when I was working at USC, it was a work study program. And I don't think that they knew that I was in earshot. So I
Oh.
applied for a lab position. I think it was mainly taking care of their mice, so ear tagging them and maybe a little bit of cell culture work. And because at the time I like my maiden name was Humphrey, so Stephanie Humphrey.
Mm.
And a lot of times I would get the, oh wait, you're Black. And that was the case when the PI interviewed me. And it was actually so his whole demeanor changed for the better, because I guess they were told that they needed to be a little bit more diverse in their hiring for students. So it was just really weird. It felt like he was relieved because he thought he was going to have to tell possibly this white candidate that, well, as qualified as you are, we can't get you. But it just so happened that I was Black, despite my name, and it worked out for the better. So
Wow.
yeah, it sucks because it's just kind of like, hey, am I here because you think that I'm qualified, or am I here because you know you got to look good. I mean, college campuses, you see this all the time where you get the diversity pick, you'll get there and it's a totally different story, especially for PWIs. So yeah, but you know what? You let me in the door. I am here, so I'm gonna do what I need to do. And then it comes to like imposter syndrome. I mean, hell, I even feel that now, just writing comics. Because there are a ton of Black women who are in this space, but there are not a lot of us that are writing for the big two.
Yeah.
And it's very evident and clear. I mean, it's not a lot of everyone else other than, you know, uh, cis presenting white men, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you're thinking, hey, like, I just hope that I am here because you believe that I have something to bring other than how I present to make you all look better.
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
you have the chance to share those stories with everyone.
Yeah, yeah, because they're comics are only as strong as those as diverse as we can get in the storytelling. Like you get a really cool Batman story from someone who is from a totally different walk of life than
Mhm.
possibly Bruce. But I don't know how many of us share the same walk of life as Bruce anyway.
Right.
I, I hope that your parents were not taken from you and your mother's pearls were not spilled across the alleyway, but
Yeah, and that was something I noticed in your Nuvia run, is how diverse the island of Themyscira was, not just in terms of colors you see, which I think was a very different version of Themyscira than so many of us have seen in the past, but in the representation of gender identity too. You want
yes,
to talk a little bit more about your dreams and
absolutely.
hopes for this version of
Yes.
Themyscira?
So George Perez's run, I got very, very, very familiar with because it is his run where I finally saw Themyscira look a little bit more diverse, didn't look as homogenous as before. And if the ideals of this this island is that women who fall to violence in man's world, whatever that violence is, get a second chance to live life again, then I would think that it would look way more diverse than that because the world is full of so many people, of so many of gender identities, ethnicities, all of that. So when thinking of the Well of Souls, at the time it was the Cavern of Souls, when George Perez during George Perez run. So I thought like, okay, so how would that look in 2021, 2022? Like, how do we bring that to today? And for me, it just felt like a natural thing to do. In fact, it wasn't even a second thought, to be honest. When it came to that, I was just like, yeah, so there will absolutely be trans women on the mascara, and not a situation of I don't know, like a shipwrecked situation. I was like, no, like the most beautiful way to convey this would be through the Well of Souls and a rebirth. So um I was happy that DC that everyone was like super supportive. There was no pushback or anything like that. So to have a character like Bia exist, just so as someone who talks about comics so much, like I understand how important it is to canonize something, just so that any writer that comes after me should be like, but no, like it happened here. So like you can't
It's
tell me like
here.
that doesn't exist because it
Yeah.
does.
That's awesome. Well, let me see if we've got any questions from our
Yeah.
audience members. We have the writer of the recent Nubia and Wonder Woman run, and she's written for many other things too. Do you guys have any questions on comic book writing or Wonder Woman or anything else?
Samples of in her verse.
Well, she is not here live. She's from
I
another
wish
place.
I
So
was.
we do have some of her things in the library.
Oh,
And after we get done, I can show you where some of them are. But yeah, we could definitely check some out today.
another question would be, how much of her past did she apply to her stories? How
Ah,
much is her in the comic?
are you able to hear some of that
Yeah,
question?
I heard
Okay,
that.
so
Yes.
how much of you is in the comics that
Uh,
You a Wonder Woman yourself?
are you a Wonder Woman yourself?
Sometimes I feel like that. I will hear that at the gym that I am so like, wow, you can lift that much. So, or my son being amazed that I can somehow sense that he's doing something he has no business doing after I told him not to do it. So yes, in those regards, yes. But how much of me is in what I wrote? I hate to say this, but probably 100% because I found that maybe not a direct insert, but everything that I write is shaped and molded by the experiences that I have. And I say that because it affects how I go about researching things. What I think is, important to talk about, even if it doesn't apply to me directly. I am not a Black trans woman, but I am familiar with the struggles that Black trans women have because that is something that I make sure to make my business. So because of that, like, yeah, so I would say like 100% of me is in anything that I write because whether it's a direct insert or not, just the way that I think of the world, the things that I watch and get inspired by show up in my work.
Very cool. Thank you.
How much technology knowledge does she need for the suit? You know what I'm saying, for all of the space age and
Oh, yeah.
you have to know engineering.
So do you need to know how much technology or engineering background do you find yourself needing to write the comics you do?
Oh, more than I wish that I did. So, uh, So, and it's something as simple as like using Microsoft Word and like track changes. So, to make conversations better between myself and editors. That's just been something that's been helpful. But as far as like technology thinking, far, far beyond, thankfully, I am a huge sci-fi fan. And one of my dream projects is to write an alien story because I am obsessed with that entire universe. So I find myself just looking up everything, even finding myself on conspiracy theory websites because sometimes it's just some really cool concepts that are there. Even now that we're getting into talks about AI, which I I don't know why you want to automate creativity, but that is a conversation for another day. But no, I'm open and I look up as much as I can, and then whatever I can't, my husband works in IT, so I just yell and say, "Hey, can you come figure this out for me? Because I'm at a loss. I can't YouTube another thing."
That's fair. That's awesome. Do you find yourself reaching out to networking people and other people in different areas just to fill into your stories?
Absolutely. What did I do recently? Um, I think I wrote something that had to do with roller skating. I don't want to give it too much away what it is that hasn't been announced, but there is someone who I know who participates in roller derbies. So I hit her up and I was like, "Hey, tell me everything." Also, the next time you all have a tournament, let me know. But also, like, tell me everything. So that's the other fun part: finding folks who are experts at other things and reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, I'm working on something. I'll buy you a coffee or send you a gift card. Can you just spend 30 minutes of your day telling me everything that you can about what you do, how you do it?"
That's awesome. That's cool. I mean, that's a lot of what we do here at the library too. So I understand just reaching out, fill in
Yeah.
what you don't know with people you do know.
Yes.
So, yes. On that note, what does your kind of daily writing process look like? Do you have one, or is it kind of just wherever you feel for the day?
So it used to be very chaotic, but I was like, this is not sustainable. So for the last 6 months or so, my process has been, getting up, starting my day. So get my son ready for school. He's off and he's gone. And then I've gotten into lo-fi music. Um, so I found some amazing channels on YouTube. I don't know, something about it just really gets me into the mindset of just, I guess, working. So be it working on an outline or scripting, filling in dialogue, whatever it is, or just researching really. Lo-fi music has been, I'll cut it on from the time like I get in the shower till I'm out, making my coffee to the room, and just have that on. And then once it's off, then I know like I am done for the day. So like lo-fi music has become my Pavlov dog situation. Right here, and I'm just like, okay, it's time to focus and to get work done. But I'm a mom too, so sometimes this doesn't work, right? Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
interrupted because of just life. So sometimes I do write stuff while I'm in the kitchen in the middle of cooking. Some of my best ideas or a problem that I was having with a plot is worked through while I am dicing peppers. So like wherever I can get, I make a good use of my notes app on my phone to like jot down things when they come to me. So for the most part, I have a process, but I live in chaos, so I'm open to pivoting in any way that I can to kind of get stuff done.
That was a question I had too. Now that you kind of touched on it, is parenthood. I had peeked into some of
Yeah.
your parenthood activate comment. I really
Yes.
appreciated some of those snapshots of daily life as a parent, myself as a parent. Um, how does that feed into the things that you write? Do you find little stories that you have with your kids interacting with them throughout the day, filtering into what you write?
Absolutely. My son was a huge fan of My Little Pony. So the Friendship is Magic series. I personally had never watched My Little Pony because when I was growing up, it was a little different.
Yeah.
And like I watched it in passing, but it was nothing like what it is today. So At the time, I was not writing comics or anything, but then the opportunity came that I wrote a My Little Pony story, and I was like, wow, you must have knew something, because now I don't have to do a ton of research. 'Cause I'm familiar with this world now. So that he really loves Mario and Kirby. So sometimes we'll play Mario Maker, which I love because that's super creative. So even to spending time with him, my son is 7 now, it helps because I am always having that creative will going because of what he's doing. He's interested in what I'm doing. Right now, I think he's working on his own comic.
Oh, that's
He's
cute.
yeah, he's been doing his own little adaptations of video games and stuff that he plays. So I would say that I'm very thankful for parenthood because it keeps me not only in the know, but it's a way for us to connect because he's into some similar things that I am into. And I don't know, I think if I was his age too, my mom wrote comics. I'm like, wow, that's pretty neat. Um, he gets to go to the conventions with me. Like I said, he is an artist, so it's nice to kind of get that exposure. I can only imagine. I don't know. I'm just really excited to see how that pans out in the people. Because
Yeah,
we're talking
maybe
about
we'll see a
nepotism. I don't.
collaboration.
Yes, I like. I know we're down on nepo babies, but in that case, I'm like, I would hope a nepo baby in that way.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm gonna turn it back to the crowd. Do we have any questions out there? No, not right now. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna do another intro. We've got new round of people coming in. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna put on my NPR voice. I am joining you now today with Stephanie Williams. She is here from recently finishing up Nubia, Amazon's Run. She's also written for Marvel. She's written also you've done some geeky commentary, right, on Fangirls.
Yeah.
And she is upcoming, got a couple of upcoming titles, but I know one of a lot of teens at our library are excited about is the Raven Boys adaptation. Is there anything you can share
Yes.
about that?
Well, I just finished up the first rounds of the revisions on the second book. I'm really excited for you all to see that Sass Millage, who's the artist on all 4 of those books, is just amazing. And it's just really cool to see these characters, I guess, come to life in a way on the page, right? To see them, now to be able to see them physically, but wow, there are times when I've been writing this. YA is something that I kind of dabble in, but I find myself now that I'm a mom, I'm always kind of like, why are you all doing that? Please stop. Do not go to the woods. That is not a good idea. But it's been really fun. I mean, Maggie and the world that she created with just the entire Raven Cycle series is just mind blowing. That second book was a puzzle. Like there's literally a puzzle that the book is centered around, but also the book itself is a bit of a puzzle. And that's been fun because graphic novels and comics, although they look the same, they are not necessarily the same. So that's been a different process from scripting a single issue comic to scripting an entire graphic novel. And then on top of that, adapting someone else's work, because what do you keep? What do you remix a little bit so that it fits the medium? It's just been really fun. It's just kind of doing some cool stuff with visually to kind of translate some things. So 2025, I think, is when the first book is out.
So we
But I try not to
a
think
year and a
about,
half. Yeah.
yeah, I try not to think that far in advance. I'm like, my son will be 10. I'm like, I can't. My mind will melt. So,
Yeah. I can understand that that parenthood aspect you thought about with YA stuff. As a kid, I was obsessed with The Little Mermaid.
yes.
And now my 4-year-old is obsessed with The Little Mermaid. And it's such a different experience watching that movie now as a parent.
Yeah.
Please don't go chasing after boys you don't know, please. I know it's cute and it's romantic, but just be careful. And she's like, Mom, I'm 4. I just want to be a mermaid.
Yeah. It's very much that. I had to sit through the Mario movie 3 times.
Yeah.
I also really enjoy Mario, but not sitting through that movie and hearing Chris Pratt read for 5 hours total. Jet Black saved it for me though, because that Peaches song, I think I know it by heart.
That's cute. I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but it's on my list. It ranks up there.
It's,
And
I mean,
I
it's
have some mixed feelings too, but I think I'll probably
yeah,
at least give it a watch.
you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
And knocking on my desk. So don't send me an email if you don't.
Okay, I sure will. I sure will. So, you are kind of local. I won't get into the U of I versus U of I Chicago debate here, but because we're just happy to have you on and to have a U of I connection, even if it is U of I Chicago. So tell us about some of your time at U of I Chicago.
Wow, what a fun time that was. So it was a university that I knew I wanted to go to because I was like, oh, I get the best of both worlds. Like I can stay on campus and like live in the city, sort of. Well, you are in the city. And a lot of skipping class to go to the movies. So that part wasn't great. That was my freshman year. So I did a lot of that, going to the AMC theater on 600 North Michigan. Lots of movies. I think I skipped an 8 a.m. writing class
Oh
actually to go
no.
see Stump the Yard. So there's that.
Well, it
A
paid
lot of
off. It all
it
came
did pay
around
off. It
eventually.
did. It eventually did. But I had a really great time there. I lived in so my freshman year, I was in the dorm rooms that were kind of meant for grad students, but they were working on, I think, SRH at the time. So that was interesting because I was like all the way on the far west side of campus. And then when I got to MRH, SRH, which was more close to Roosevelt, that was fun. They put a Cold Stones there.
Yeah.
Yes, very broke college student eating Cold Stones every other day. So it's nice. BSB, which is the behavioral science building, getting lost in there, trying to find Psych 101 and whatever other class. I think I had a French class in there too, which was weird, but really great time. Parking sucked. It's terrible.
That's
I would say
across the board anywhere
that's
in Chicago.
yeah. So I would say like that's where U of I definitely has UIC beat, because you don't have to worry about your car getting towed after you rush
Oh,
to get to an organic chem exam. So then that's when I discovered the tow I don't know, like there's this tow yard that's under Wacker Drive. Lower Rack is like located on Lower Wacker Drive, so where they filmed those Batman movies, and it
yes.
looks just as creepy. Batman is not coming
Yeah.
to save you though. Yeah. So
They don't have to throw any filters on. That's what it looks like.
no, not at all. But it was a really great time. A lot of at first I was gonna be I was pre-med, and then I was like, ooh, so I like people, not enough
Mhm.
to become a doctor in that way. But I would love to help you all, but I'll do it in the lab. So that's when I got exposure to that. Which was really cool. Research is something I didn't really have on my heart before I went, but I think it was well, I'm blanking on the class, but the professor was, of course, PI, and I went there to his lab to do a makeup test, and like, got a tour of the lab and everything. And I was like, hey, do you take volunteer students? He was like, I don't, but I have a postdoc. I mean, a PhD candidate who does. So I started working with her, and then it was just off to the races. I think it was like processing soil samples, which was pretty cool.
Interesting.
And boring, but cool too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. My grandpa was actually the professor of ag engineering here at the U of I, UC. So actually I know a bit about soil samples myself.
Yes.
Not super fascinating, as you said, but it is also like, oh, really? You can tell all that from some dirt. Okay.
Yeah.
So in college and in comics, I think both require quite a bit of collaboration. How has any of that fed into how you collaborate between your writers, your co-writers, and in multiple crossover events, or if you have the artist element that you need to collaborate on versus with the editors? How does that all tie in to collaborating for you?
So I try to make it known that like, hey, I am a team player, so I'm here to make so whatever is required to make the story the best that it needs to be, then that is what is most important to me. So I'll usually try to write something at the beginning of the script because sometimes you get to talk to the artist that you're working with, other times you don't. Sometimes you don't even
Mhm.
know who the artist is until like after the fact.
Wow.
So yeah, like so in my scripts, and that's more so like the bigger two. Like when you're doing indie things, of course, you're able to have one-on-one with your collaborators. So I'll try to write something at the beginning of the script that says like, hey, so and so, so happy to work with you. The reference images that are provided here are simply reference images. You don't at all have to follow this. If there is something that you think would work better, do it. Because I don't know, like as a writer, I can only see things to a certain extent. I try my best to kind of have I guess the artist perspective in mind, but sometimes it's just impossible. So I'm always open to like, hey, if you think this looks better this way, do that. Same thing with editors, like listening to, or not listening, but reading what they say. And it's not a personal attack. It's just, hey,
Mhm.
like you this is what you need to do for the story to be clearer, or like are you sure this is what you want to say, because if you're telling me this is what you mean, this is not at all what this is reading as. So like being open to
Oh.
that. With the colorist, conveying like, what the skin tone should look like. So I use the Fenty foundation.
Oh, that's creative.
Yeah,
Okay,
so I'll
yeah.
link so I'll link that actually, and the reason why I do that is because when I think of makeup, you're thinking of lighting. And comics has lighting as well too. So for a darker skin tone, there could be warm undertones, cool undertones with any skin type, right? So
Yeah.
instead of just saying, hey, this character is a mocha color, like, no, they are a Fenty 440, or this character has olive skin. No, they're a Fenty 210. So, and I hate that those might actually be accurate because I spent too much time on that page, but trying to be as I'm just trying to be as open with communication as possible, because in research you have to be the same way.
Mm.
Especially if you find someone's research paper, you call them up and you say, hey, so like for this, if they answer, hopefully they do, but for
Yeah.
like when you're running this, I don't know, like when you're doing your cell culture work on this and you wanted to, this much protein, like if I were to tweak this, do you think it would work, and things like that. So it has helped a ton. Especially working with doctors. Before writing comics, I worked at the hospital doing electron microscopy. So just doctors, you got to spell it out plain
Mhm.
and be quick because they're busy. So that also helped a ton.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
narrow down those concise
Yeah.
things. It's
'Cause-
obviously you've got a small
yes.
bubble to put the words in, just like you might have a
Hmm.
smaller bit of time with that doctor.
Yes.
Yeah. That's cool. It's cool to hear how all these different pieces of your life have like fed into what you do now, whether it's
I mean,
science
even
or
when I was a
college and
waitress,
yeah.
yeah, because when I'm at conventions, you have your banner and everything up, and maybe people know who you are, maybe they don't, maybe they're familiar with their work or they're not. So I don't want to say you turn into a used car salesman or anything like that, but you do turn into a bit of a marketer or maybe a used car salesman where you're just trying to let people know as quickly as you can, hey, this is what this is, which you would feel free to browse. Living Hero, I have free on my website for people to look at. And a lot of times I'll tell folks, hey, you can read this for free, or this is on Marvel Unlimited or DC Universe Infinite. You can read it for free or with a subscription, and they'll still come back and actually buy the physical thing, which I'm always astounded by. I'm like, wow, you must really enjoyed it. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Please take an extra sticker.
Yeah, and now we'll see that a lot in libraries too, which obviously we have all these books for free.
Yeah.
It does often will lead into that sort of aspect, and people want to give back. They either come to give back their
Yeah.
time, or oh, I got the whole rest of the series. Let me donate it to the library, so you have the rest of them. And it's always great to see people get introduced to things for free and then want to give back. That's
Yeah.
which
It's
it
the
kind
gift
of
that
is
keeps on
about Free
giving.
Comic Book Day too. Such a
Yes.
chance to launch with the free issues today, and then go out and find the books through the Gmart here locally or other local comic shops or the bookstore nearby. So that's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. One of the other questions I had was particularly back to the mascara and your depictions of what is used to be referred to as Paradise Island, and obviously in your run it wasn't such a paradise. Did you have any thoughts or ideas on why you chose to show it? As you know, we have some conflict on Paradise Island too. You want to talk about a little bit on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know, I felt like something like that would be a little subjective. And just because you remove one thing, and in this case, it's men from this island, didn't mean that it was gonna be like, gumdrops and rainbows. I mean, it's not even that in My Little Pony, and friendship is magic there. So, um, again, like some of what I've watched or read, also just going back to Madeline Miller's Circe, that book, because women were the focal point of that, be it heroes, anti-heroes, villains, whatever. I don't know, like that just kind of really put me in a mindset of, hey, like these are different ways that you can show conflict. It doesn't have to be outright, fist fights, war, or any of that, but like this is how tension exists. So we do a little West Wing spin on the political nature on Themyscira, like that could be fun. But I don't know, I just thought it would be a little bit boring to be like, oh yeah, like it's fine. Like, Hippolyta left, she took Diana's place in the Justice League, and now you have Nubia Queen now, like, yeah, everything's okay. No one's gonna have a problem with that. No, of course someone's gonna have a problem with that. This woman has been champion of Doom's dwarf way for all this time, and effectively kind of like in the basement of Themyscira. So now she's out really facing with a lot of either, her peers, neighbors, and all of that. Like, what does that look like? Do some folks have a problem with that? And because they're on Themyscira and there isn't like a racial component to this, because they're all Amazons in that way. There are still different ways to kind of show like this tension and conflict. You have this person who's been thrust into leadership because she was willing to look at Medusa's head, which wasn't even in the box anyway. So I don't know. I would probably be like, hey, like Hippolyta, what are you doing? Like you've had some questionable things that you've pushed before, but like, what is this? There was no election, no any, and I guess with a monarchy, it wouldn't be any of that. But that's the other thing. They're they thrive on, or not thrive, but they have a monarchy in place. That's something that is out in the real world. You got one person in quote unquote power. Again, like there's going to be some type of tension or something there. Not everyone is going to be happy or in agreement with what is going on. So what does that look like? And what it looked like was Medusa running around causing chaos on the island.
Like literal chaos.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that I really appreciated that you brought that element to it. It was I think so much of the history of Wonder Woman, and specifically Nubia, is usually just from the angle of, oh, but back home everything's perfect. So I liked getting to see that angle of, even in the ideal situation, there's still going to be some disagreements, and this is how we can handle it. So
yes, that part right there. And I think that's the bigger piece. Like, well, we have some problems, but this is how we go about handling it, because we don't have all these other external factors. Like, so this is how we kind of work through this. Because at the very end of the day, it is a sisterhood. Like they love each other. I go back to George Perez's run because there were some really intimate moments between the Amazons. There's a moment between Philippus and Hippolyta because Diana is down in Doom's doorway, and Hippolyta wants to go get her child.
Yeah.
But Philip is like, well, no, like I love Diana just as much as you do. but I love you more, and also your queen. I cannot, like, as your second in command, like, I cannot allow you to do this. So they fight it out. It's a pretty gruesome fight.
Yeah.
And Hippolyta's mom's strength wins through. So she ends up going after Diana, but it's such a beautiful, beautiful moment. And honestly, I think it was like after, and it's only like 2 pages, right? That interaction. But I think it was like after reading that, I was like, okay, to me, this is a perfect snapshot of who the Amazons are. They are women who they are dedicated to their duties, whatever they are. So be it right or wrong, morally or whatever, like they're going to see it all the way through. And then figure it out once the dust is settled.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I reviewed it recently and was just impressed with how much you put into those few short issues. Each one was like, I remembered it being so much bigger, and then I was like, oh,
Yeah,
this was so simply done, and yet it captured
yeah.
such a wide variety of angles and opinions and outcomes, really. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
well done. How has that fed into your writing? Has there something besides working with doctors that's maybe helped you capture some of those thoughts and put them out there in a succinct way?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say yes, but I don't know where I can exactly pinpoint it. I would say either, sometimes it's a conversation I've had with my mom or my grandmother or a friend of mine. I find, oh, like that was a word of wisdom. That kind of applies to this. Or in different confrontations and by confrontation, I mean just like disagreements that I've had with someone, where I felt one way, but they effectively, made their point. I was like, oh, wait, you're right. Right. So kind of, really applying the whole conflict resolution situation into this. And wow, because I hated when they would come to our schools and like they would put us in a classroom. I don't know if you ever, like there was like these conflict resolution folks. It was when I was in elementary school, they would come in, we would watch these videos. So
Oh,
the movies they were fine or whatever, but it was
yeah.
all about conflict resolution and different ways that you could settle things. And what a terrible time. But it came back because I thought about some of those and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of how we can apply this. Because that's the fun thing about writing. Often you're writing folks who wouldn't do what you would, right? So
Mhm.
then you are really putting yourselves in their shoes. And as much as it might annoy you, anger you, make you scared, or whatever, just kind of exploring things through their eyes. So really, I guess being kind of empathetic to your characters and the bad or good decisions that they'll make. The new character that I'm writing right now, she does something that absolutely you would never do in the lab, but she
Yeah.
did it, and here we are.
Here's the consequences.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think we did those in elementary school, but I do remember those kinds of classes in middle school. And those were usually those little videos, at least the videos I remember were cringe worthy. Oh boy.
Yes,
It was just
the
like,
acting
no one
was
acts like that.
no.
But I do remember now so there are still some points of those classes in middle school where at that time I was not paying attention and I'm like, oh, there is a smidgen of that still in my brain. Okay. All right. I get it. I'll turn it back. Do we have any other questions?
So,
Let's see.
right, but I have a question about 10 minutes back.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're gonna go 10 minutes back for this question.
So
Yeah.
the content that you've written that touches on the classical, and I don't know what you call it, but just like the Greek era. When you are writing for that era, how do you decide what the foundation is going to be? And so you're mentioning something about Medusa, and you're talking about various aspects. When you come across when you're writing narrative like that, how do you decide what is going to be the foundation of that character and the way
Were you able to get all that? I know the mic might be
I
hard for the
think
audience, but I think
no,
the
no, I
summary,
think
if I could
so.
sum it just in case audience live members don't get it, is how do you take the angles of your Greek mythology issues with kind of the more modern stuff and decide what kind of comes and what doesn't? Is that kind of the summary of it?
Well,
Or if you want to come up here.
I find that there is variety to what people think about that area.
Yeah, I'm going to see if we could get the mic a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so when you take a character that is commonly understood and you're writing a narrative where they appear, if there is variety from references, how do you decide what is either accurate or what makes sense for that character when you include them?
Thank you for that. Yeah, that wasn't quite how I thought it. So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no, and thank you for asking that. So I pull tarot for my characters. That is something that I heard Guillermo del Toro, that's something that he did. And I thought that was really fascinating because if you're into astrology, any of those things, it's kind of like, oh wait, yeah, that is me, right? So sometimes I'll do that. And I say that because it gives me a foundation for this character, so that while I am doing whatever research I am for what I need to write, what would their stance be on this? So really, honestly, kind of like putting myself in their shoes, and like, so I might reject this, but this character wouldn't. So really just rejecting anything in my feelings or anything like that, and really trying to, again, like put myself in that character's shoes. So for instance, for Nubia, because she was champion of Doom's Doorway for so long, and is someone who hadn't really had a lot of, I guess, FaceTime with other Amazons on this island, for her, like I felt like a lot of decisions that she would make would sometimes be a kind of little insular in nature, because she's had to rely on herself, her wits and all of that, and make final decisions on her own without conferring to anyone. But she hasn't been champion for that long without having the knowledge that, okay, well, maybe in this new role, I got to act a little bit differently. She is able to pivot and adapt. So I figured that she would be able to adapt to being queen. So in that adaptation, she would be fighting, she would kind of be having like this inner battle where of course she would want to rely on what she did in the past in surviving as champion, but now as queen, she does have to confer with others, right? So keeping that in mind, she would possibly listen to what they have to say, but at the very end of the day, still maybe even do what she planned on doing anyway, or maybe take it into what they have in consideration. So I hope that answers the question, but yeah, I hope that answers the question. It probably doesn't, but I guess what I'm trying to get to is that I'm looking at, like, I don't know, are they a Gemini moon? How would they react to, how would they do this thing? Or you know what? Maybe Nubia was a bad example. Recently I had to write Moon Girl. She is a 12, 13-year-old whiz kid. There's a lot of stuff that she would do at 13 that I wouldn't do. And I had her stuck in a video game. So how would Moon Girl go about, trying to make her way out of a video game? Well, she would try to create these different gadgets and stuff like that and get out. She would be a little headstrong and not maybe listen to the, like the rules and whatnot, or the instructions, or like what you should do, because she would think that she would be able to do it. She's smart. She knows everything. So that's the lesson there, is to listen to those who know what they're doing so that they can help you out. So
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think that's good. And I think it relates to kind of what you were saying earlier. It's taking the elements of past things from your experience, tying that in what other people would do. And how are you going to tell the story that at the end goal, what is that story you want to tell? Right.
Yeah. Because, self-inserts happen. but I feel like the best self-inserts happen and where it makes sense in the story. And recently I wrote something and I think I inserted my son, but it made sense for that character because a lot of similarities between that character and my son were the same. So I was like, oh, well, I know exactly what this person would do because I live with them. So I was able to do it that way. But I don't know, like creative writing has been tricky in a way that academic like research wasn't, because it's so analytical, but also creative writing is kind of analytical in itself, especially comics, because um how many panels do you need on this page to effectively tell this one thing so that we can get to the page turn? Also, where are we at on this page turn? So
Yeah.
having those in mind. So the same thing with the novel, what is making you want to turn to the next page? Same thing with the comic, that last panel, is that something that makes you want to turn to the next page? And like having that in mind with the storytelling, you know, like I hated physics. I was not a fan of calculus, but those are all things I had to take. But it's really funny how some of those broader concepts of math come into play even while writing comic scripts.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Especially with superheroes. Physics, I would
Oh,
imagine, play in a lot more than you really want them to with superheroes.
yeah, because you know, if Nubia has a staff that can transform and go into like this whip-like state, like is that infinite? I had recently, not recently, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, learned that Diana's lasso of truth was something that was infinite in how far it could go. And I'm like, I didn't know that. I thought it was just, I thought maybe you
Yeah.
had 30 feet of rope and that was it. Clearly, it's not the case.
That's interesting. Not a concept I think I would ever have to think about.
No,
Yeah. Well, do you
it's
have any
weird.
writing advice for those who might be wanting to get into comics or writing in general for themselves?
Yeah. So my first thing is like writing hopefully should be fun. It's something that you are doing because there is a story that you want to tell and you want to get out, or a poem that you want to piece together and get out. As far as comics, how do you script? There is no set standard on that. There just isn't. There's kind of like a rough, like, this is how this should look, but there's no set standard to it. So this is where research comes into play. So for me, a lot of the collections that I would pick up, sometimes the writers' scripts will be in the back. More recently, I think it was the House of X, Powers of X, Jonathan Hickman director's cut. I remember getting that because I was like obsessed with it at the time, and all of his, well, not all of them, but I think 2 or 3 scripts were in the back of those. So I was like a real nerd about this. I would have the script open, and then like on my computer, because I bought it also digitally, I would look at the pages and look at the scripts and how did they translate to the pages. Some of that is going to get lost in translation because there's some things that you won't be able to, like edits that you won't be able to see, but for the most part it comes through, and that can kind of really gave me an idea of how to go about scripting my things, so that because you're telling the story first to your artist and your editor, so trying to make that as clear as possible so that you can have that vision fully realized. But yeah, looking at how other people do stuff, that's always
Yeah.
a great way to go about stuff, is looking at how others and those who are really good at what they do, looking at how they do it and figuring out how then you can make it work best for you. So never a direct copy and paste, because that's not fun.
You got to tell your
fun.
story.
Yeah, you got to tell your story. So finding out how you can apply what they've done. I know for myself, for different comic stories that I really enjoyed, I go and I ask myself, well, why did I like this so much?
Mm.
What was it about the story that just really rang true for me, thinking about that and then saying, okay, well, then if I were to tell a story that kind of included these aspects, then how would I tell it? Which has been a really fun exercise. And sometimes I end up writing things where I'm just kind of like, ooh, I really don't like how this it's, it's still like it turned out the way that I did, but man, that kind of hurt to write that because that is not at all what I wanted to put the character through, but it's
Oh,
something that they needed.
that's interesting. So it's a collaboration for, what you had in mind and then what actually comes out and making that work too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
making it work. Because that's the other thing, like a comic is never done being written until it is printed. There are a lot of times that again, like this is why it's important to really be as collaborative as possible, like your artists, your colorists, all of the editors, because sometimes an artist and the way that they convey what you've written might look a little bit different than what you describe. Sometimes it might look totally different, but that change was made. And for me, I found that change was made because it just made the story flow better.
Mhm.
So I'll either get rid of dialogue or tweak the dialogue to fit because sometimes the dialogue isn't needed anymore because the art is saying what I was saying in the dialogue anyway. So I don't need to both show and tell. Let's show here, we'll tell later, in some other aspect. So really being open to changing, I mean, not changing your story, but tweaking it again to make that story as best as possible. I'm never ever married to exactly what I write because sometimes that changes too. I was
Yeah.
feeling one way on Monday. I feel totally different on Friday. And this thing actually, it no longer reads the way that it did. I mean, it's sometimes like when you watch a movie or read a book, right? I've read stuff that the first time I'm like, ooh, I didn't really like this. And I read it maybe years later. And I was at a place in my life where I was able to, I don't know, to actually, take that book or that movie the way that I need to. And I'm like, oh, it clicks. And I'm like, oh, actually, I really
Oh,
do like this thing. I think of
yeah.
Michael Shannon's Take Shelter. The first time I saw that movie, I was like, I don't know, I'm good on this. And then I watched it while I was dealing with postpartum depression. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it now. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting note. That's an interesting note. Well, we're getting close to wrap up time. I just really want to appreciate you for the time you spent with us here today, for the questions you've answered from the audience, from
Yeah.
answering my questions.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of like hot one style, is there anything you want to leave us with before we sign off for today? Any projects you want to push?
Yes, actually. So I have a Magic the Gathering story that I wrote. That'll be out June 14th. I'm really excited about that because I didn't know anything about Magic the Gathering prior to being asked. But because I am the research nerd that I am, I threw myself headfirst into all things Magic the Gathering. And surprisingly to me, maybe not to the editors, but to me, a really beautiful story came out of that featuring Jace and Vraska, who are two planeswalkers. So I got to do something that I've been trying to do for a while, which is put more romance in comics. Because if I'm not reading comics, I'm reading romance novels. It's like a little swashbuckling romance story that they have there. So I would love if you all check that out. It's not capes and tights, which I'm always excited when I get to play in another sandbox that has absolutely nothing to do with Batman, Superman, or Iron Man, or any of them. I love those stories, but I just love really just fun storytelling and fantastical stuff anyway. So please check that
That's
out.
awesome. Well, I
Yeah.
definitely will put that on my radar. I've never played either, but my husband loves it. So now I'm
Yeah,
gonna check it out for that.
I'm into D&D now. I think probably by the end of the summer I will find myself hopefully in someone's group because I'm obsessed with it now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Stephanie. I hope you have a good free comic book day and
Yes.
really appreciate you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I am just honored to be here again. Anytime that someone's like, "Hey, come talk up to us about comics," I'm like, "Are you sure?" So I'm happy that you were sure. I appreciate everyone. Questions were amazing and great. I hope I was able to answer them, but thank you all so much.
She did great. Thank you so much. Take care.